Hello, my name is Dr. Marci Littlefield, and today I want to talk to you about the social construction of race. Sociologists like to talk about how social categories like race and gender are socially constructed because society has a very distinct way of determining the meaning of those categories. When we look at how race in particular is socially constructed, what we know is that many scholars believe we all belong to one human race, which originated in Africa, and that the reason why we see so many differences amongst groups of people is because of those migrations that migrated out of Africa and bred all the populations that we have today. So what we see over time is that humanity has experienced a lot of intermixing, and what scientists are coming to understand over and over again, that race as a biological category has nearly lost all of its meaning. It doesn't really exist. Race as biology just doesn't work. Some biologists and social scientists suggest we drop the term race because perceptions of race affect the lives of many people profoundly, and we can see the way race has played out historically in American society. But what we see over and over again, that perceptions of racial difference are socially constructed and often arbitrary. And that's part of why the problem of race exists in American society. Race is often connected to other factors that really have more to do with how society is organized and social structure than it does how people look. So what's the definition of race? Again, race is a socially constructed category. It's composed of people who share biologically transmitted traits which are considered to be important by members of society. The problem with that definition of race, or defining people and putting people in these racial categories, is that the meanings of racial differences and the meaning of race varies over time. And it varies depending on where you are, time and place. What we know is that no society has biologically pure people. There is more genetic variation, and this is what scientists find over and over again, that there's more genetic variation within each racial category than between two categories, because we're all part of the human race. And what this means is that race is considered to be a form of social stratification in American society. That means people are stratified according to the race that they belong to. And what that causes racism. Racism is a way that race is used to discriminate and cause social inequality in American society. And we see that that's happened over time and in other countries across the world, and through imperialism. We see that happened with the slave trade with Africans. We also see the mass genocide against the Jews that also took place as a result of how this country defines race. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is also, like race, socially constructed. It's part of a shared cultural heritage. For most people, ethnicity is more complex than race. We have a really multi-ethnic society, and ethnicity is also very much so part of how we think of race, but it's also an important part of culture and language. And ethnicity is constructed from cultural traits such as ancestry, language, or even religion. But why is race so important? It means that the ideals about racial categories, that is genetic features that people possess that look different, that cause them to look different, vary in their social definition, depending on the cultural and historical context in which those racial categories exist. There are different types of minority groups. These minority groups are very much so consequences of race, which means that minority group is a status which defines how groups are treated in society. And certain minority groups have less power and less resources. There are ethnic groups, there are religious groups, there are gender groups, there's colorism, and there are other subordinate groups as it relates to age, disability status, physical appearance, sexual identity, and minority groups are discriminated against, and they experience racism. Racism is the belief that one racial category is superior or inferior to another category. And it's widespread throughout the United States, where ideals about racial inferiority completely supported the system of slavery. But it is still very much so a serious problem in the United States. This chart shows where the minority majority exists. The green here shows where you have a higher percentage of minority groups. The green, the light green, and the yellow. The burnt orange represents where the majority exists that are not in minority groups. What we see is that racial and ethnic groups are changing over time. They're changing in number. The purple represents those of European descent, and you see over time that category is getting smaller. But overall, the problem with racial beliefs, and this is, if we think about the whole functional aspect of what racism means for society, racial beliefs provide the ideal that people are different, provides a moral justification for maintaining society, and it deprives a group of its rights and privileges. So, there are some ways in which racism is functional for society, and it functions in certain ways, and there are ways that it's extremely dysfunctional. Racial beliefs justify existing practices. Racial beliefs promote societal change. Because of these racial beliefs, we have a number of organizations that protest and have succeeded because of these racial beliefs. And so just like the functionist perspective is always thinking about how do certain things happen in society? What makes society functional? What makes it dysfunctional? In that way, what racial beliefs do is racial beliefs cause people to have to protest and work together to try to change things. So in that way, racism can also be dysfunctional. It causes discrimination. It fails to use the resources of all individuals. It limits the search for talent and leadership to the dominant group. It promotes disrespect for law enforcement. And social change is inhibited because of racial beliefs. We see a lot of ways that racial group status have been created over time through immigration, through forced migrations, through globalization, and through colonialism, through intergroup status. But all in all, we see that racism has really affected American society. So again, racism, we know it has no biological basis. However, it does have consequences. It has serious consequences for our society. And are we living in a post-racial society? Definitely not.